بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Respected brothers, I welcome you all to the first lesson of our brand new course, Tasrif al-Izzi, a comprehensive study of Arabic morphology, insha'Allah ta'ala. Before we commence, I'd just like to confirm, quick audio check. Is my voice clear? Is my voice clear? Can you hear me
Yes,
clearly?
yes, I can hear clearly. Alhamdulillah.
Excellent. Alhamdulillah. If at any point my voice is unclear or there's a disruption, please let me know, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So, inshallah ta'ala, in this course, we will be studying the text of Tasrif al-Izzi, also known as Tasrif al-Zanjani. Tasrif al-Izzi is a text written by a scholar, a great scholar of Sarf, al-Imam Izzuddin al-Zanjani. And it's called Tasrif al-Izzi, taken from his laqab Izzuddin. And it's also called Tasrif al-Zanjani, taken from his nisbah towards the city of Zanjan. So in the Indian subcontinent region and the Persian region, this book is known more commonly as Tasrif al-Zanjani, and in the Arab world, it's known more commonly as Tasrif al-Izzi. It is one of the most popular works in Arabic morphology. But like I mentioned in the introductory webinar, which is also available on YouTube for whoever was not able to attend it, in the introductory webinar, I mentioned in it that we will be using Tasrif al-Izzi, the matan, as a vehicle, as a guide, guiding us through ilm al-Sarf, inshaAllah ta'ala. However, our aim will be to add as much flesh to it as possible. Because Tasrif al-Izzi in itself is a beginner to intermediate text. It's a beginner to intermediate text in itself. طيب. However, our study of it is going to be more in depth. Our study of it is going to be more in depth, insha'Allah ta'ala. So without further ado, this is a list of the topics which we will be covering, insha'Allah ta'ala. طيب. Number one, we'll talk about what is sarf, what ilm al-sarf is, what is the difference between Nahw and Sarf? Is there a separate ilm called ilm al-Ishtiqaq? If so, what is its relationship with ilm al-Sarf? What does Sarf study in particular? That's number one. After that, we'll delve right into the fundamental concepts of Sarf. Number one, the types of words in the Arabic language, which is called al-Aqsam al-Thalatha. Then we'll delve into a categorization of nouns and verbs based on the number of their letters, which is the second fundamental concept in Sarf, called al-Aqsam al-Sitta. Then we will delve into the third most fundamental concept of Sarf, which is the categorization of nouns and verbs from the perspective of the kinds of letters they are made up of. And this is called al-Aqsam al-Sab'a. These three are the three foundational concepts of Sarf. And in the middle, we will also talk about al-Mizan al-Sarfi briefly. Today, we will just have an ishara towards the Mizan al-Sarfi. We will just try to understand the basic idea of al-Mizan al-Sarfi. In our next lesson, we're going to delve into the details of al-Mizan al-Sarfi and how we measure every Arabic word using the Mizan, insha'Allah ta'ala. Time will probably not permit us to discuss point 7 and 8, but let's see, insha'Allah ta'ala. So starting off, what is with the first question, that is, what is sarf? What is ilm al-sarf? The first thing to note, ikhwan, is that umbrella term which included both. Nahw was an umbrella term which included the principles of both Arabic syntax, Arabic sentences, how to make sentences, how to do i'rab, and it also included the rules of what we know today as sarf. So classically, the word Nahw was a comprehensive word. It was a comprehensive term. Just one moment. Now, so as I was saying, the word Nahw was a comprehensive word, which included the study of both principles related to Arabic syntax and principles related to Arabic morphology. It included both. That's why in classical works like Al-Kitab by Sibawayh, you find both the rules of Nahw and the rules of Sarf. Classical works like Al-Kitab by Sibawayh discuss both the rules of Nahw and the rules of Sarf. It's only later on that Sarf started to be treated as an independent science, right? That is why in many books, when you come across a discussion on the wadi' of ilm al-sarf, the founder of ilm al-sarf, those scholars who believe that Ali radiallahu anhu founded ilm al-nahu, they will say that he also founded ilm al-sarf. And those scholars who believe that it was Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, Abu al-Aswad al-Dhalim al-Du'ali, his name was Dhalim, they believe, those who believe that he founded Nahw, they also believe that he founded Ilm al-Sarf. And there are some scholars who consider the likes of Abu Uthman al-Mazini to be the founder of Ilm al-Sarf, because he's the first person who wrote a separate treatise, a separate work, a separate book on Ilm al-Sarf. So he's the first person who turned it into this independent science. But from the most popular views is that Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali or Ali radiallahu an, one of them is the founder of both Ilm al-Nahu and Sarf, because classically the term Nahu included Sarf. The term Nahu included Sarf. But now, of course, in our times, and in the time period after the Mutaqaddimin, after the early scholars, Nahw and Sarf were treated as separate sciences, as separate subjects, as separate disciplines. So, from that perspective, what is Sarf? What is Sarf? Sarf, or Arabic morphology, is the subject which studies the structures and conjugations of Arabic words. Now, I'm aware in English, the word conjugation is usually used for verbs, but we will use it more loosely. Whenever we say conjugation in these classes, we mean tasrif, and we mean, we mean ishtiqaq. طيب. We mean the process of one word changing into another, or the process of one word being derived from another word. That's what we mean by conjugation in our classes. So Sarf studies the structure and the conjugation of Arabic words. It is concerned with how the word is structured and how that structure changes when we form new words. That is the primary concern of Sarf. Ilm al-Sarf is concerned with how the word is structured and how that structure changes when we form new words. So the primary concern of Sarf is the Arabic word, the individual word, from the perspective of its structure. That's the primary concern of Ilm al-Sarf. Now have a look here. Have a look here. We have the word daraba. So, daraba. This is an individual Arabic word. Now, sarf, you will already have noted based on the definition, based on the conception that we have given. We haven't given a complete definition yet. We'll give it towards the end of this, right? But based on what we've mentioned so far about ilm al-sarf, you've come to understand that number one, sarf does not study Arabic sentences. The subject of sarf, the discipline of sarf, has nothing to do with the Arabic sentence. That is why you can pick up any book of sarf, from the most basic work like Matnul Amthila to from the most comprehensive works like the Shuruhat of Shafiya by Ibn al-Hajib, and you will not find discussions on sentences because they are not the subject matter of ilm al-sarf. Sarf does not study sentences. That is the job of Nahw. That is what the subject of Nahw is dedicated to. The subject of Nahw studies the Arabic sentence, the anatomy of the Arabic sentence, the structure of the Arabic sentence. But Sarf studies the individual word in terms of its structure. In terms of its structure. Because even when we talk about the individual word can be studied from a number of perspectives. If the word is studied from the perspective of its meaning, overall meaning, that's called ilm al-lugha, the study of the language, the content of the language. And that is covered in Arabic dictionaries, Maqayis al-lugha, Lisan al-Arab, Taj al-Arus, and so on and so forth. If you want to study the meanings of individual words, you will not study sarf, you will study ilm al-lugha. Yes, there is an element of morphological semantics which is covered in sarf, because the structure adds to the meaning. So when the structure is adding to the meaning, that type of meaning is what we're calling morphological semantics. That is covered in sarf, and we will study that inshallah ta'ala. Right? Ismul fa'il has a particular meaning. The sifa mushabbaha has a particular meaning. The bab if'al has a particular meaning. The pattern, the form. The form of taf'il has a particular meaning. So those particular meaning, those morphological semantics are covered. But if you were reading a book and you came across a new word, right? Let's say khandaris, right? Khandaris, you came across the word khandaris and you want to know what the word khandaris means, you will not open a book of sarf to understand the meaning of khandaris. You will open up a dictionary. You will go back to the works of ilm al-lugha. Ilm al-lugha covers the overall meaning of the word. You can also study the word from the perspective of its etymology. It's from the perspective of its relationship with other words. Relationship is the subject of ilm al-Ishtiqaq, for those who consider ilm al-Ishtiqaq to be a separate science. The ilm al-Ishtiqaq studies the relationship between words from the perspective of the letters of the word. So ilm al-Ishtiqaq looks at the letters of the word. It looks at the tanasub, the commonality in meaning, and it studies the relationship between words. That's ishtiqaq. And there are other scholars who would consider ishtiqaq to be a part of ilm al-sarf because there is a lot of overlap. There is a lot of overlap. And for the most part, the principles of ishtiqaq, the principles of relationships between words, they're generally covered in the books of sarf. But if we want to study the structure of the Arabic word, then we will study ilm al-sarf. And these three sciences, ilm al-lugha, ilm al-ishtiqaq, and ilm al-sarf, make up a comprehensive study of the individual Arabic word. And then when you want to understand the Arabic sentence, its anatomy and its meaning, the basic meaning will be uncovered through Nahw and i'rab. But further semantics will be covered in balagha, in ilm al-balagha, where you will study how the changing of sentence structure affects meaning, how the usage of particular figurative devices affects meaning, how the usage of particular features like rhyme adds to the beauty, the aesthetics of the sentence, of the speech. That's balagha, ilm al-ma'ani, bayan and badi'. So when you want to study the Arabic sentence from the perspective of its structure and meaning, you will study the sciences of Nahw and balagha. And if you want to study poetic structures, you will study ilm al-arudi wal-qawafi. Ilm al-arudi wal-qawafi is concerned with the structure, the physical structure, the anatomy of poetry. So it studies speech, it studies sentences, but very specific sentences, poetic sentences. And these sciences make up the most essential sciences of the Arabic language. When you look at the Arabic language as a whole and you divide it into each element of the language which is studied, you can say broadly that either we will study the individual word or we will study the Arabic sentence. Either we will study the individual Arabic word or the whole Arabic sentence. If we're studying the individual Arabic word, there are three sciences that concern us. Ilm al-lugha, which uncovers the meanings of words. Ilm al-ishtiqaq, which uncovers the relationships between words. And ilm al-sarf, which covers the structures of Arabic words. And as for the Arabic sentence, we have ilm al-nahw, ilm al-balagha, and ilm al-arudi wal-qawafi, which covers poetic sentences, the structure of poetic sentences. Coming back to ilm al-sarf. Ilm al-sarf studies the structure of a word. Now, I've used this word a lot. I've said it many times, structure of a word. What do I mean when I say the structure of the Arabic word? What does that mean? What does that mean? The structure of an Arabic word is made up of four things. When we say that the morphologist, the Sarfi, studies the structure of the Arabic word, we are saying that he studies four things about the word. And this is mentioned in many books of Sarf, Shafiyat ibn al-Hajib, the Shuruhat of Izzi and others, inshallah ta'ala, you can find this there. Number one, the order of the Arabic, the order of the letters in the word, which is called Tartib al-Huruf. In which order do the words come? Number two, the number of the letters in the huruf, in the word. The number of letters. How many letters does a word have? Number three, the harakat or lack of harakat. Short vowels mean harakat. Fatha, dhamma, kasra. These are short vowels, right? So what harakat are there? Are there all fathas? Is there a dhamma anywhere? Is there a kasra anywhere? Is there a sukoon? A sukoon essentially is a lack of a haraka. Sukun means that there's no fatha or dhamma or kasra there. That's what sukun means. And number 4, which letters are the root letters and which letters are additional letters? Root letters are those letters which make up the original structure of the word. And additional letters are letters which are added to the word for different purposes. But the structure of the word includes the study of the root letters and the additional letters. So now, if we look at daraba, this is the order of the letters. Da first, then ra, then ba. It has 3 letters. As for harakat, there are 3 fathas. As for root letters, all of these letters are the root letters. If you remove any of them, the essential meaning of the word is gone. All 3 are root letters. So this is what we mean when we say the structure of the word. Sarf studies this structure because it is these things which change when we change the word. When we try to form new words, or when any type of change occurs in this word, these things change. In the case of qalb makani, which is a phenomenon in sarf, it's a phenomenon in sarf where the position of the letters change. So in this phenomenon, the order of the letters changes. The number of letters can also change. One letter can be removed. Letters can be added when we're forming new words. When we're forming new words, the harakat change, and so on and so forth. So the structure, this is the structure of the Arabic word. These 4 things make up the structure of the Arabic word. So Sarf studies these 4 things and how they change, when we form new words or when we change the word for the purposes of articulation. Okay? Now, this is a very important point, and this is really an important point for someone who wants to understand the philosophy of Sarf and the idea behind it. The Arabs have used a number of words to express meanings within themselves. Those words are recorded in dictionaries, and they follow a set structure. It's important for us, if we want to speak Arabic properly, if we want to write Arabic properly, if we want to understand Arabic properly, that we should be aware of those structures and how the Arabs used them. For example, the Arabs used the pattern of fa'il to denote the person from whom the action occurred. So they'll say darib, nasir, dhahib, akil, qa'il, so on and so forth. Understanding these structures is important if we want to speak the language properly and if we want to understand it properly. Now, the scholars of Sarf, when they studied these structures, they found relationships between them. And these relationships are what we refer to as ishtiqaq. And we'll talk about the types of ishtiqaq in a few minutes, inshallah ta'ala. But the morphological changes that happened, the scholars of Arabic realized that within Arabic words, changes are occurring, right? When I say yadribu, I'm making this, conjugating this from daraba. So daraba changes and morphs into yadribu. They also noticed that because words follow a set pattern, there are certain words which, if we take them at face value, they are not following those set patterns. Qala. Qala is not following the set pattern of fi'l madi. The Arabs, when they use fi'l madi, there are set patterns which they use. They either say fa'ala or fa'ila or fa'ula. qala is not coming on any of these patterns because there's a sukoon on the alif. Arabs don't use fa'la as a pattern for fi'l madi. So there must be something there. So when they study the word deeply, they realize that the word changed articulation easier. There was qawala on the pattern of fa'ala, and then it changed to qala to make the pronunciation easy. Because Arabs as a rule, they run away from thiqal. Arabs as a rule run away from heaviness in speech. And so when you notice the morphological changes, the changes that are studied in ilm al-sarf, they boil down to two types of changes. Changes which the Arabs make for the purpose of meaning. There's the word daraba, but I want to express the meaning of this action happening in the present or the future. So I'll change it to yadribu, to fi'l mudari'. This change from daraba to yadribu, this ishtiqaq, is for the purpose of meaning. It's for the purpose of meaning. I've changed this word to another. I've derived a word from this word. Why? To form a new meaning, to express a new meaning. Similarly, I might want to say darib, the one who hit. I have the word rajul. Rajul, it's an ism jamid. Rajul. I want to say two men, I say rajulan. I want to say small men, I say rujay, I say rujail. I want to say many men, I say rijal. All of these changes are occurring for the purpose of meaning. This is one type of change which Sarf studies. One type of change. The second type of change which the Arabs make to words is for the purpose of articulation, for the purpose of ease in articulation, to make the word easier on the tongue. This change does not happen for meaning-based reasons. The meaning does not change. The meaning of qawala is the same as qala. The meaning of qala is the same as qawala. There's no change in meaning. The only reason why this change is happening is to make the word easier to pronounce. And so essentially, all the changes that occur in sarf go back to one of these. Either it goes back to changing the word in order to produce words which can express new meanings, or changing a word to make it easier to pronounce. Examples of other words which were changed to make them easier to pronounce: the walala or radada. Walala is difficult. Walala, right? There you have two words from the same makhraj coming one after the other. Walala. So you say walla, radada, radda, madada, madda. This change is for the purpose of articulation. So essentially, all the changes in sarf go back to one of these two reasons, right? Tasrif linguistically means change, taghyir. That's what tasrif linguistically means. And so change in words, which we study in, so sarf studies the change. Remember we said sarf studies how the word is structured. We talked about the structure. And secondly, it studies the change that happens. This change is of two types. Either it's a meaning-based change, which we call taghyir ma'nawi, or it's an articulation-based change, which we call taghyir lafzi. Taghyir lafzi and taghyir ma'nawi. طيب. Now, why is this important? I've briefly mentioned some of these points. Why is studying these changes important? Why are we bothering ourselves? in essence, to study these changes. Number one, the first point is we need to follow the natives. We need to make and pronounce words like the Arabs used to. So if we're not studying Sarf, we will not be able to learn how to do that. The Arabic language has set structures and principles. Just like there are rules for making sentences, there are rules for making words. So we need to follow those rules. If I want to produce the meaning of present tense or future tense within a verb, I need to conjugate a fi'l mudari. I need to know how to conjugate fi'l mudari. How will I conjugate it from 3 root words? How will I conjugate it from 4 root words? And so on and so forth. Number 2, producing variant words. In any language, we want to be able to express different ideas using the easiest possible methods, right? Instead of saying الذي ضرب, I can just say الضارب. Instead of saying الذي ضرب, I can say مضروب. So Arabic morphology provides us with set patterns for being able to do that. Instead of saying المكان الذي ضرب فيه, I can use اسم مكان. طيب. So these are conveniences. These conjugations, these ishtiqaqat allow us to speak effectively, to use language effectively. The third thing, which this is also important for, by the way, is Arabizing words. When we Arabize any word, whenever we make a word Arabic, we take a foreign word and we Arabize it, we need to mold it into Arabic structures. We need to make sure that it is following the rules of Arabic structures. And one of these usages which I found quite intriguing was that there's a scholar who was talking about the PDF version of a book, and he said nuskhatun mubaddafa. So PDF in Arabic is BDF basically, right? And so it was very intriguing for me when he said nuskha mubaddafa, a PDF version of a book. So when we Arabize words, we want to make sure that we are molding them and putting them into the correct molds, the correct structures. Based on this conceptualization of Sarf, now we can come to define Sarf, inshallah. And because Sarf has a theoretical element and a practical element, it is the habit of ulama, scholars, to mention both these definitions, the theoretical definition and the practical definition of Sarf. Even though in Tasrif al-Izzi, only the practical definition is mentioned. But the theoretical definition is also important because it helps us conceptualize the overall discipline. And the practical definition tells us what we are expected to do. So theoretically, Sarf is the discipline which studies rules pertaining to the structure, bina or sigha of the Arabic word. علم بقواعد يعرف بها أحوال أبنية الكلم التي ليست بإعراب ولا بناء. This is the definition of Ibn al-Hajib in Shafiyah. That it is the ilm, the discipline with those rules through which we get to know the conditions of the structure of the Arabic word. And these conditions have nothing to do with i'rab or bina. The last part is added to take out ilm al-Nahw from the definition. Because ilm al-Nahw studies the Arabic word and the Arabic sentence from the perspective of i'rab and bina. Nahw, in Nahw you'll find, I mean here someone can say that we're saying the Arabic, that Nahw studies Arabic sentences, but we find rules pertaining to words as well. So we find, for example, definitions of which word is mamnu' min as-sarf and which is not. The point is that Nahw, even though it studies words, it studies them from the perspective of i'rab and bina, not from the perspective of their structure. Nahw, whenever a book of Nahw will discuss Arabic words, it will be discussing them from the perspective of i'rab and bina, not from the perspective of their structure. That's the difference. So theoretically, sarf is the subject which teaches us rules pertaining to the structure of the Arabic word. And practically, it is, as mentioned by Al-Imam Izzi al-Zanjani and others, تحويل الأصل الواحد إلى أمثلة مختلفة لمعان مقصودة لا تحصل إلا بها. It is the discipline which teaches us how to change the root word, the asl al-wahid. The asl al-wahid, according to the root word, according to the Basrans, is the masdar. And according to the Kufans, it's the fi'l madi. And inshallah ta'ala, in our next lesson, we're actually going to engage in this discussion. We'll have a look at the evidences of both sides. The reason why I'm not mentioning it here is because it's not needed here, the discussion. We'll discuss it when we talk about the mushtaqat, the types of ism. Ism is of three types: jamid, masdar, mushtaq. So when we talk about that, we'll talk about this difference of opinion between the grammarians on which word is the asl, which word is the origin, the source from which we get all words. Because the way grammarians conceptualize the Arabic language is that there are some words which are loan words. They are jamid. It's like they don't really have, they don't know their parents, essentially, in a way, right? Like rajul. Rajul is an ism jamid. It doesn't come from any other source. We are able to make it plural, so rajulan or rijal, but we don't get mushtaqat, like we don't get verbs from it, we don't get ism fa'il, ism maf'ul from it. So it's an ism jamid. Ism jamid is essentially a word which does not come from a masdar, and you don't derive words, or you don't derive verbs or other asma' mushtaqat from it. It does have like plurals and so on and so forth. You can derive, you can get plurals from it, for example, or tasghir from it. So you can say rajul rujail, but you don't get asma mushtaqat like ism fa'il, ism maf'ul, and you don't get fi'l madi, fi'l amr, and so on and so forth from it. So it's ism jamid are like those loan words. And then you have ism masdar, which is essentially the mother word in the conception of the Basrans. Of course, according to the Basrans, the masdar is the mother word, and from it you're getting all these different derivations. You're getting af'al, you're getting other asma like ism fa'il, ism maf'ul, and so on and so forth. And asma mushtaqat are those which are derived from the masdar, right? In the Kufan in the Kufan mind, it is the fi'l madi, which is the asl, and you get the masdar from it, and you get other asma' mushtaqat from it. But even there's a relationship, right? So that's how you conceptualize Arabic words. So this discipline practically, Sarf practically teaches us how to change the root word, the asl wahid, to different forms and structures in order to attain different meanings, so that we're able to attain different meanings. So from daraba I get yadrib if I want to express the meaning of present tense or future tense. Idrib if I want to express the meaning of an order or a demand, and so on and so forth. So these are the definitions of sarf which we need to remember: the theoretical definition and the practical definition. Now let's come to the difference between tasrif and ishtiqaq. What is the difference between tasrif and ishtiqaq, right? Now, before that, we need to understand what ishtiqaq is. What is ishtiqaq? Ishtiqaq, in terms of practicality, when we look at it from a practical side, it is where we derive one word from another word. And so when we've derived this one word from another word, they will have similar letters, and they will have a commonality in meaning. And in terms of the concept, ishtiqaq is the existence of commonality between the mushtaq, the word which is derived, and the mushtaq minhu, the word it is derived from in terms of meaning and wording. So the existence of commonality between the derived word and the source word in terms of meaning and wording. So there's a commonality in meaning and there's a commonality in wording. Both of these need to be present in order for the relationship between these words to be that of ishtiqaq. The ishtiqaqi relationship between words needs to have a commonality in meaning and wording. So they need to have similar letters. And they need to have a commonality in meaning. They need to have a commonality in wording and a commonality in meaning. Not all the letters have to be the same, by the way. Darib is mushtaq. It's mushtaq from the masdar. But there is a commonality in letters. The essential root letters are the same. So now that we've understood what the concept of ishtiqaq is, ishtiqaq is of three types. You have ishtiqaq saghir, ishtiqaq kabir, and ishtiqaq akbar. Ishtiqaq saghir is when there's a commonality in letters and their order as well. So you have commonality in letters and the order is also the same. For example, we get daraba from darb based on the Kufan paradigm, right? And by the way, that is the paradigm which we will be following, that the masdar is the asl. Daraba, darb. Now, daraba has the same letters. There's a commonality in the letters and in order as well. The letters are in the same order. This is called ishtiqaq saghir. The da comes first, then ra, then ba. Even darib from daraba is ishtiqaq saghir. Da comes first, then ra, then ba. And ishtiqaq saghir is what is commonly referred to in ilm al-sarf. When ishtiqaq is mentioned in ilm al-sarf, they are referring to ishtiqaq saghir. Right? They're referring to this. When we derive one word from another and there's a commonality in letter and the order. Ishtiqaq kabir is when there's a commonality in letters but not in the order of the letters. So jadaba and jabada. The meaning is the same. Remember, the meaning, there needs to be a commonality in meaning as well for any of the relationships to be considered ishtiqaqi relationships. So here there's a commonality in letters, but not in order. The order is different. And ishtiqaq akbar is there's a commonality in letters, but that commonality does not mean that the letters are all the letters present are the same. Rather, the commonality is in the makharij of the letters, the makharij of the huruf. Na'aqa, nahaqa. Ha and ayn have the same makhraj. Even though they're different letters. So ishtiqaq akbar is when there's a commonality in the articulation points of the letters. Makharij. So here the commonality is in the articulation points. In sarf, the ishtiqaq which is referred to is ishtiqaq saghir. When we do ishtiqaq of فعل ماضي, فعل مضارع, فعل أمر, اسم فاعل, اسم مفعول, اسم زمان, اسم مكان, اسم تفضيل, this is all ishtiqaq saghir. This is all ishtiqaq saghir. Now, what is the difference between tasrif and ishtiqaq? So ishtiqaq, one of the opinions is that ishtiqaq is a part of sarf. Right? So scholars consider ilm al-ishtiqaq to be a part of ilm al-sarf. Because, and the books of sarf mainly cover ishtiqaq saghir because these rules of how we're doing ishtiqaq of fi'l madi, fi'l mudari', fi'l amr, ism fa'il, ism maf'ul, these are mentioned in the books of sarf. Other scholars consider ishtiqaq to be a separate science. So there is some overlap between the two. Like there's overlap, but ishtiqaq is a separate science, and they say that ishtiqaq studies the relationship between words in terms of their essence, the root letters, Essence here means the root letters. So Ishtiqaq studies the relationship between words in terms of their root letters, whereas Sarf studies relationships between words based on their structure. And Imam Shawkani has a separate book on Ishtiqaq, which is one of the few separate works on Ishtiqaq called Nuzhatul Ahdaq. And his work really, the way it's composed, is that he tries to find meaning-based commonalities between words which have similar letters and letter combinations. طيب, that's what Imam al-Shawkani does in his work. Now in Kashf al-Dhunun, this is a beneficial passage mentioned there in trying to define the difference between اشتقاق and صرف. He says الاشتقاق علم باحث عن كيفية خروج الكلم بعضها عن بعض بسبب مناسبة بين المخرج والخارج بالأصالة والفرعية باعتبار جوهرها. Right? جوهرها, the letters, the root letters. والقيد الأخير يخرج الصرف. So اشتقاق is derived from another due to the commonality between them. Ishtiqaq studies how one word is derived from another due to the commonalities between them, which is the source, which is the derived word, based on the root letters. And he says, وَالْقَيْدُ الْأَخِيرُ, the last qayd, jawhar, this takes out ilm al-sarf. إذ يبحث فيه أيضا عن الأصالة والفرعية بين الكلم لكن لا بحسب الجوهرية بل بحسب الهيئة. Because in sarf we study which word is the asl, the origin, which is the far', the derived, but not from the perspective of the jawhar, the madda, the root letters, rather from the perspective of the structure. مثلا يبحث في الاشتقاق عن مناسبة نهق ونعق بحسب المادة. In ishtiqaq, they will look for the commonality between the two from the perspective of the root letters. وفي الصرف عن مناسبته بحسب الهيئة. And in sarf, they'll look for the commonality in terms of the structure. فامتاز أحدهما عن الآخر. Therefore, one is distinguished from the other. طيب. And he mentions that the goal of ilm al-ishtiqaq is al-ihtiraz an al-khalali fi al-intisab. That when it comes to attributing words to one another, finding out the relationship between words, you will not err in that. So that sort of sheds some light, inshallah ta'ala, on the idea of the difference between ishtiqaq and sarf and the common and some of the overlap as well. But you need to remember that many of the principles of ishtiqaq are covered in the books of sarf anyways, right? Because of the close, I mean, it's not a very far off difference, root letters and structure, right? So because the difference is not far off, there is a lot of overlap between the two. What about Nahw? We already mentioned this. So Nahw studies the structure and formation of Arabic sentences. And it studies the grammatical functions of a word within a sentence. It does not study the structure of the word or how the word was formed or conjugated. Because Arabic is a mu'rab language, inflected language, many words change their endings when their grammatical function in a sentence changes. Thus, Nahw studies that change of ending as well, but it still does not concern itself with the overall structure and formation of the Arabic word. Sarf, on the other hand, studies the structure and formation of the Arabic words. It does not concern itself with the Arabic sentence. So, in conclusion, we can say that Sarf studies the Arabic word in terms of its structure and formation, whereas Nahw studies the Arabic sentence and grammatical functions of the Arabic word within the sentence. And both of these disciplines make up the study of Arabic grammar. Arabic grammar includes both the study of Nahw and Sarf. And so here I've summarized the differences. Inshallah, I'm going to share this presentation in the group as well. You have Nahw, you have Sarf. So Nahw studies the Arabic sentence primarily. Sarf studies the Arabic word primarily. Nahw studies the ending of the Arabic word, which changes due to the changing of operators or grammatical functions. And Sarf studies the structure of the whole word and how it changes to form other words, or how it in itself changes to ease articulation. With that, alhamdulillah, we're done with our first topic of the day, which is what is Sarf? What does it study? There's one more important point which I want to mention here, that because Sarf studies change, words which don't go through change, they are not covered in the books of Sarf, and they are not studied in Sarf. Words which do not go through change are not studied in the books of Sarf. So harf, particles. By harf, I mean huruf al-ma'ani, particles. Min, ila, fi, ala, and so on and so forth. Lam, and so on and so forth. These are not studied in Sarf because they don't go through changes. There are verbs which are jamid. They're called af'al jamida. They don't have other conjugations. They're not studied in Sarf. Nouns which are mabni, because of their similarity with huruf, because of their similarity with particles, mabni nouns like huwa, hiya, dama'ir, hada, hadi, these are not studied in Sarf. Foreign names are not studied in Sarf. So Sarf essentially studies mu'rab nouns and af'al mutasarrifa, verbs which have conjugations, essentially. طيب. Now, those words which I mentioned that Sarf does not study, there are different levels in which Sarf engages with them. There are some words which Sarf does not study at all. There are some, like foreign names, which Sarf might study from particular perspectives. For example, when we make them muthanna, dual or plural, jam', right? Sarf might study an element like that. طيب. But as a general rule, we say that Sarf only studies nouns which are mu'rab and verbs which are mutasarrif. Why? Verbs which have conjugations. Why? Because Sarf essentially studies change. طيب. And so nouns which are proper names, proper foreign names like Ibrahim, Yusuf, Ismail, Arastu, they're not studied in Sarf. Asma'ul aswat, sounds, ghaqa, adis, hala, taqi, these are not studied in Sarf. Asma'ul af'al like uffin, sah, amin, ruwaida, asma' af'al, verbal nouns, they're not studied in Sarf. Af'al jamida, verbs which do not have conjugations like laysa, asa, khala, ada, hasha, ni'ma, bi'sa, these are not studied in Sarf. Particles, huruf, fi, min, ila, rubba, sawfa, they're not studied in Sarf. Now, like I said, within these words, which we say Sarf does not really study because they don't form the essential subject matter of Sarf, you need to remember that some of them are dealt with partially in the books of Sarf. So there are some which Sarf doesn't study at all, right? And there are some which Sarf studied elements of. Like we say Ismailan, two Ismails, right? Or Yusufi, the nisba towards Yusuf, right? So it studies some of these words from some particular perspectives. And there are some of these which are studied as an exception, right? Which are discussed in the books of Sarf as an exception. But like I said, the general rule is that Sarf only studies nouns which are mu'rab, nouns whose endings are able to change, either haqiqatan or hukman, either in reality or they don't change, the endings are not changing in reality, but there is a haraka muqaddara and so on and so forth, right? So it studies mu'rab nouns. Any noun that is mu'rab would be studied in Sarf, and any fi'l which has conjugations would be studied in Sarf. Apart from that, Sarf will not study other things. Some of these other things will be mentioned as an exception because there's some topic of them related to Sarf and so on and so forth. But as a general rule, they're not studied in Sarf. Now, the first fundamental concept in Sarf is this, the three types, which is the three types of words in the Arabic language. This is the first introductory concept covered in pretty much every book of Sarf, right? So this idea is very simple. We already know this. All the words of the Arabic language can be categorized into three types: ism, fi'l, harf. Every single word within the Arabic language, every single one, can be categorized into one of these three types. You can take all the words of the Quran, the Sunnah, everything, and you can make a column, ism, fi'l, harf. You can categorize all the words into three columns, either in the column of ism or fi'l or harf. What is an ism? What is a fi'l? What is a harf? An ism, so a simple way of defining it is that an ism is a naming word, even though this from a Nahwi perspective is not fully accurate, because an ism in Arabic includes adjectives and pronouns and adverbs and so on and so forth, right? So essentially, any word which is not a fi'l or a harf is an ism. The technical definition of ism, which is mentioned in the books of Nahw and Sarf, is that it's a word which has a complete independent meaning of its own. What that means is that you don't have to put it in a sentence for its meaning to come out, for you to understand something. When I say rajul, you understand that I'm saying man. I don't need to put this in a sentence for you to understand that I mean man by rajul. So it has a complete independent meaning of its own. And it is not connected with a time frame. An ism is not connected with a time frame, past, present, or future. The identifying markers of an ism are al, the definite article, acceptance of huruf jar, fi, ila, and the ability of it to come as a subject of a sentence, for it to become the subject of a sentence. Only an ism has the ability to become the subject of a sentence. Fi'l and harf don't have that ability. So these three are markers of ism. If you are confused, is this word an ism or not? Think, can it accept any of these three? Does it fulfill any of these three? If it does, it's an ism. So an ism, there are two parts to its definition. Number one, it has a complete independent meaning of its own. Number two, it is not connected with a time frame. A fi'l, simple definition, it's an action word. Denotes an action. But this also, from a Nahwi and Sarfi perspective, is deficient, because a fi'l does not just denote an action. It also denotes the time frame and the connection with the fa'il, the relationship with the fa'il. So the technical definition of fi'l is an action word. It denotes time frame and it denotes the relationship with the fa'il, the one who did the action, right? So the technical definition of fi'l is a word which has a complete meaning of its own. Here it's similar. The definition is the same as ism till here. Because a fi'l as well, if I say daraba, you understand that I'm talking about hit in the past, right? Daraba, so and so hit in the past. You understand the meaning even though I've not put it in a sentence. So that's what this means. And the difference between fi'l and ism is that fi'l is connected with a time frame, past, present, or future. Identifying markers of a fi'l, it accepts qad or seen or sawfa. The identifying marker of a fi'l amr is that it has the meaning of a demand in it, talab, and it has the ability to accept the ya'ul mukhataba, which we use for feminine, for females. So idribi is a fi'l because there's a meaning of a demand or an order in it, and it is accepting ya. Idrib is a fi'l because it has the meaning of a demand in it, and it has the ability to accept ya. Even though there's no ya there, it has the ability to do it. Rajul is an ism because it has the ability to accept al, the ability to accept fi or ila, the ability to come as the subject. طيب. Daraba is a fi'l, it has the ability to accept qad. يضرب is a fi'l, it has the ability to accept sin or sawfa, and so on and so forth. Finally, we have particle harf. A simple way of understanding harf is by way of elimination. Any word which is not a noun or a verb is a harf. It's a particle. The technical definition of it mentioned in the books of Nahw and Sarf is a word which does not have a complete meaning of its own, and its meaning is only fully understood when it's put in a sentence. So a harf's complete meaning is not understood when it is said on its own. When I say fi or ila, you don't understand the full meaning of it until I put it in a sentence. Then you'll understand what I mean by it. Because these huruf have multiple meanings for which they're used. And the context designates one particular meaning. So it's a word which does not have a complete meaning of its own, and its meaning is only fully understood when it's put in a sentence. The identifying marker of a harf is its rejection of the markers of nouns and verbs. The fact that it rejects the markers of nouns and verbs. So process of elimination. Your homework, inshallah ta'ala, for this particular part is that you'll take out the first 10 verses of Surah Al-A'la and sort out all the words into these three categories: ism, fi'l, or harf. So you'll make a column like this, right? You make a table like this with 3 columns, and you'll sort out the words in the first 10 verses of Surah Al-A'la into these, inshallah. Now, we've understood the definition of each three, but in the books of Sarf, some additional details are mentioned regarding these. So, for example, why is ism called ism? Why is ism called ism? The word ism linguistically means either sign, marker, or loftiness. So linguistically, it means a sign for something, a sign which alludes to something, or loftiness, as in high, something being high and lofty. And it is used normatively, urfan, it is used urfan for the name of someone or something. So when we say ism, urfan, by it we mean the name of someone or something. Now, according to the Basrans, and I've been saying Basrans and Kufans, but what we mean by Basrans and Kufans is that we're referring to the 2 schools of Arabic grammar, the Basran school and the Kufan school. There were 2 essential schools of Arabic grammar, the Basran school and the Kufan school. They used to have debates amongst each other. They wrote books and so on and so forth. And they have differences of opinion on different matters. And so they're referenced a lot, especially in the books of Sarf. According to the Basrans, the word ism was originally simwun, which means loftiness. Sama yasmu. Sama, it was originally samawa. Yasmu was yasmuwu, right? From nasara yansuru. The waw was dropped, and in its place, the hamza was added to the start. And the haraka of sin was given to the hamza. So it became ismun. Thus, ism is called such. Ism is called ism because it is more lofty, higher in stature than its counterparts, fi'l and harf. Why? Because you can construct a complete sentence using ism. And ism can come as a subject and a predicate. A fi'l and harf don't have the ability to come as the subject. So it's loftier in status than the 2. That's why it's called ism. This is the Basran view. The Kufan view is that ism was originally wismun, which means sign or marker. The waw was removed and a hamza was added instead. So according to them, it's called ism because it is a marker or sign for its musamma, for the one who holds the name. It is an ism is a marker or a sign to the one it alludes to. So that's why ism is called ism, and these are the 2 opinions on that. The word fi'l is ism masdar. It means action or work. It is called this because it includes in it the meaning of hadath, the meaning of action, hadath. It's called fi'l. The word harf linguistically means corner, taraf, corner. And it is called harf because in speech it comes at a corner. What does that mean? It does not make up the essential subject or predicate of the sentence. So it is like it's coming at the corner of a sentence. That's why harf is called harf. طيب. Now here I've mentioned this note, which I've already explained to you guys, that some words in the Arabic language don't change. They have a fixed structure, which doesn't need to be fully studied because it's fixed and doesn't change. These words are not used for conjugation, and therefore they don't need to be fully studied morphologically. They're studied in Nahw for syntax purposes, but they're not studied in Sarf because you don't conjugate from them, their structures don't change. So these unchangeable words include all the particles harf, words غير متصرف or فعل جامد. It should be noted that although these aren't studied in detail in Sarf, it should be noted that although these aren't studied in detail in Sarf, they can be referenced in the books of Sarf, and some elements of their structures can be studied. Okay? So, in actuality, Sarf studies two types of words. Declinable nouns, asma' mu'raba, also called asma' mutamakkina, and changeable verbs, af'al mutasarrif. طيب. So here I mentioned that. طيب. We're beyond the hour mark. There's still a lot which I wanted to cover in today's session. So a quick review of what we studied thus far is what is Sarf? What does Sarf study? What are the different types or changes which Sarf studies? We've talked about that, two types of changes: articulation-based changes and meaning-based changes. What type of words does Sarf study? We said asma' mu'raba, af'al mutasarrifa. We've talked about Ishtiqaq, we've talked about ism fi'al harf and why they're called thus. Now we're moving on to the concept of Mizan us-Sarfi. This is a very, very important concept in Sarf. The concept of al-Mizan us-Sarfi. Now, we said that the Sarfi wants to study the individual Arabic word. The Sarfi wants to say the individual Arabic word. In order to study the structure of this word, the morphologists have come up with a measuring tool, with a scale, to check these Arabic words, and to study their structure. So the morphologists came up with a measuring tool, with a scale. It's not a real scale, it's not a physical scale or a physical tool, it's a conceptual tool, a conceptual scale, which helps them study the structure of the word. And this scale or measuring tool tells us everything we need to know about the structure of the word. This measuring tool or scale is fa'ain lam, fa'ala. Fa'ain lam, fa'ala. This is a model which the morphologists came up with so that they could study the structure of the Arabic word, and so that this model, this scale, will tell us everything about the structure of the Arabic word. What is added to it? What are the original letters? Where are the root letters? What changes occurred to it? And so on and so forth. So in order to study a word's structure, the Sarfi, the morphologists, they translate the word into the scale. So daraba, when you translate into the scale, it becomes fa'ala. What we do is, when we're translating a word into the scale, we keep the harakat the same. The harakat are copied as it is into the scale. The first letter corresponds with the fa in the scale. The second letter corresponds with the ain in the scale. And the third letter corresponds with the lam in the scale. So daraba is on the scale of fa'ala. Say ala wazni, on the scale of fa'ala. Darbun is on the scale of fa'lun. We copy the harakat as they are. The first letter corresponds with fa, the second with ain, the third with lam. Now here you might ask a question. You might say that there are some words which have more than one root letter, more than one original letter. Ruba'i word, khumasi word. What do we do with regards to them? So if a word has more than 3 original letters, if a word has more, so for 3, this scale fa'in lam is enough. Right? For a word which has 3 root letters, 3 original letters, fa'in lam is enough. But for a word which has 4 original letters, or 5, nouns, ism jamid can have up to 5 original letters. So if a word has more than 3 original letters, we add another lam at the end of the scale. So dahraj, the da is an original letter. The ha, the ra, the jim, all of these are original letters. None of these are additional. So we add another lam at the end. Dahraja is on the wazn of fa'lala. We copy the harakat as they are. The fa, the first letter corresponds with the fa, the second with the ain, the third with the first lam, the second and the last letter corresponds with the second lam. The second lam. How do we translate words which have additional letters into the Mizan? That is something we will talk about inshallah ta'ala in our next lesson, where we discuss the principles of the Mizan in detail. This is just to give you an overall idea of the Mizan. The Mizan, the measuring tool, the scale is fa'ain lam. It's a model which the morphologists develop, which tells us everything we need to know about the word. And this part, it tells us everything we need to know. This will become apparent to you as we go further, inshallah ta'ala. Now, someone might ask, why did the morphologists use fa'ain lam, fa'ala as the model? How did they choose this particular word? Number one, because the word fa'ala is the most general verb, and thus it encompasses all other verbs. It's the most general. Fa'ala means he did an action. It is encompassing of every action. Now you might say, okay, I understand why they used fa'ala for verbs, but what about nouns? Right? So even in the case of nouns, the doer is called the fa'il, the object, the maf'ul. Right? So there is a generality to the fa'in lam there. There's a generality there. So we use the same scale for verbs and nouns. Fa'in lam. Another reason why they chose fa'in lam as the scale is because these 3 letters represent the 3 articulation points, the 3 makharij: lips, mouth, and throat. So these are 2 of the reasons: generality and the representation of 3 articulation points. These are the 2 reasons which tend to be mentioned in the books of Sarf regarding why morphologists chose fa'ain lam as the Mizan, us-Sarfi. The topic after this is quite lengthy, so inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to pull my brakes here. In our next lesson, inshallah ta'ala, we'll start our discussion on the second fundamental concept of Sarf, which is the 6 types. In our next lesson, we'll try to cover the 6 types, the 7 types, and the principles of the Mizan, inshallah ta'ala. Barakallahu fikum. Do we have any questions?
I think that's
Well,
it. There's no question from
right.
my side.
Jayyid, alhamdulillah. Do we have any questions, ikhwan? Is everything clear? Are all the concepts clear? In this lesson, my aim was to convey the essential idea behind Sarf and its importance, and to explain some of the fundamental concepts of Sarf before we start delving into the other parts of Sarf. Because I mentioned in the introductory webinar that Sarf studies 4 things essentially. Books of Sarf will cover the fundamental concepts, which are these, right? They will cover conjugations, how we conjugate. That is a very important part of Sarf, right? How we conjugate ism fa'il, how we conjugate ism maf'ul, how we conjugate fi'l mudari', how we conjugate them from different types of words. Number three, sarf covers exceptional rules, irregularities. There are some words which don't follow the general rules. So how do sarfis make sense of them? That's studied in irregularities. And finally, meanings and khasiyat. So inshallah ta'ala, our aim is that we want to study all of that, inshallah ta'ala, right? But of course, in order for us to be able to appreciate all of that, our fundamentals need to be rock solid. We need to have a rock solid understanding of the fundamentals of sarf and the idea behind sarf. What is it? What it studies? What are the types of changes that occur to Arabic words, and so on and so forth. So inshallah, if there are no questions, we will end our session here. Make sure you guys do your homework, which was taking out the 10 ayat of Surah Al-A'la and sorting out ism fi'l harf from them, inshallah ta'ala, using the definitions and the markers which we have learned, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum for attending, and I'll see you all next Saturday, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Next Saturday or next Thursday?
Next Thursday. Next Thursday. I'll see you guys next Thursday. Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, salam.
Walaikum salam. Barakallahu feek.
Feekum, barakallah.